first I want to say thank you to our hostess, and this is a beautiful home. Thank you very much. Holly and all of y'all that have worked so hard to put this together. Thank you very much. Yes, absolutely. This is no small task. I also want to acknowledge the people who've come here from the farthest. We have somebody coming in from California to say, if you have any idea, Juliana over there from California, to make sure. You want to know what happens when the liberals in charge? There's that. And then we have one of my oldest political friends, if not the oldest, Dave Wiley over there, came down from Denton. We were young men back in the day, and so that was fun stuff. And it's kind of a funny deal. We have a mixture of people that I've known for 3 decades. People are just meeting for tonight. So I appreciate all of you coming out. It's super helpful, and it's invigorating. The campaign trails, not always fun, but nights like this are invigorating and motivating, and they're helpful. It's because some of you have just met me. I'll go ahead and go through the shortened version of the bio. So bear with me, and then we'll get to the fun stuff. Back when I was a young, useful person to society, I was an engineer. And so that was a lot of fun. I did that I went to UTA, get my bachelor's and master's in 93, and then went off to be a registered engineer, which I still am. And then I went to law school in my 40s after helping start a charter school, the Arlington Classics Academy, which is at the time it was the nation's largest startup charter school with 360 people the first day. And that was a cool deal. And people sometimes say, well, why do I care about charter schools? Because for the same reason you hear about the Fort Worth mass bite. The charter schools allow other schools nearby to feel the heat of competition and do a better job. And today, because Fort Worth ISD is not having its mask, there are other school districts in nearby counties that are watching, and they know they would lose the lawsuit, and so they have not masked. Now, some of them have slipped back during the Omicron. We can get back more into that. Crowley has fallen to the wayside again. We had that lawsuit, and we won that, and then we all settled it, and they went away again. But these little fights make a big difference because people are watching them. So during the charter school thing, I realized that this law thing isn't all that difficult. Went to law school at night and came out. And I was supposed to be doing patent law and ordinary civil litigation, but these things keep cropping up. Arlington's decided to make it illegal to hand out constitutions to people if you're carrying a long gun. They don't put it that way. They said you couldn't have any motorist interaction, and so we sued them in federal court. And fixed that a little bit. And it's just little things that coming up. And so we kind of in our law firm we have this kind of a joke that's it's team justice, and we white hat law, and we kind of as a gig. So we have all these mundane cases that kind of pay the bills, and then we have the ones that we love. And so last year there was City of Fort Worth was using a sign ordinance to keep sidewalk counselors that were pro-life from talking to people that were going into a clinic, we'll call it, so we got that invalidated because they're misusing that to harm people's ability to communicate. So sometimes you don't hear about these things, right? Not all these things you hear about because they're not particularly fun. But then occasionally, every once in a while, something pops up. And so back during the non-essential essential thing. In March, I wrote on Facebook, look, you're going to have social unrest when you say don't go to work, have some money, and don't do anything with it. What do you think is going to happen? How predictable can this be?
Exactly.
And of course, months later, you have just all sorts of horror going on. Not insurrection, that wasn't insurrection, but that came later. But yeah, very different. Mostly peaceful conflagrations of private businesses. But what do you expect is going to happen, right? So we were fighting that, and of course, the most famous case that I think I've ever had is the Shelley Luther case, where she stood up, right, and people could recognize that. And we had 18 people that we were part of that lawsuit. Shelley stood up, and people recognized that, and people can identify that. Everybody knows a person that works in a salon. They don't get free money just for showing up. They got to work to get their money, and there's no PPP for those folks. And so that became kind of a big deal. And so then we had this whole series of those cases, and then became the mask issue. Now I thought, and this is the funny thing. This is a funny story. I think it's funny anyway. So we're in the judge's courtroom during the TRO hearing, and every time opposing counsel gets up to talk, they pull their mask down.
Yes.
Every time. And now they've got their expert witness who's got a PhD. Right? Everybody in the room's got these advanced degrees. We're all talking about a subject that we all know well, speaking a language that we all speak very well, and opposing counsels talking to their expert about how, well, wearing a mask really doesn't impede teaching. It's not a big deal. But it was great during closing argument where I could say, they say that, but their actions tell a different story. They pull down their mask every single time they talk, right? It was crazy. And so, and I have to give the credit where credit's due. Judge Shub, and we have good judges in Tarrant County. I can tell you that he was not easy on us, but he just applied the law. And that doesn't happen in every courtroom across the state, I can tell you. We're in appeals court in Austin. We have the mask fights go on and on. We're in appeals court in Austin. We're in Elgin, Texas. We're in appeals court, federal court in El Paso. We're getting ready to start another one in Richardson. It's a big mess, and most of the courts are not what we need because they're all these big cities that are run by liberals, and they don't care. It's crazy. And then we get into we'll get to the Parent Bill of Rights in a minute, but the stage is now where we're trying to help people who are likely to die to take a medicine they want to take that's cheap. Now, some of you all paid attention to Melanie Squires. Her husband, Kyle, died a couple of weeks ago. After we got a TRO, a restraining order from a judge that says, give him the ivermectin. They issued the TRO. This is an order from the court. Ivermectin's cheap and easy. It's plentiful. They all have it. They chose not to do it. 3 days later, they file an application for writ of mandamus with the higher court. They eventually get him over to the VA hospital. They spent at least $50,000 to not give a dying man a cheap, inexpensive, plentiful medicine. It's insane. And this happened again not too. There's another precinct chair that you all may know. And we wrote a demand letter so they could even see her dad because they're all non-vax, and so and they wouldn't let him go see him. So they finally got to go see him for the last 2 weeks, and of course then their death protocol killed them too. I'm not an anti or pro-vax guy. I haven't, but it's on you, right? And we all know what it does and doesn't do. But this idea that we're going to force people to die alone in their hospital room, and we haven't talked about the nursing homes, it is insane. And so whenever I see all these things, I know I have to run for office, right? That's what I did, because I got motivated because Beverly Powell, our senator, was the only senator that's Democrat that went with the Democrats into D.C., so hanging out with those guys. And I said, no, somebody's got to do something. We don't know what the lines are going to look like, so I knew that I was going to probably be in the lines no matter what happened to them, so I announced. And then since the lines have changed, I bought signs for one county. I got 8, so that makes it exciting. So it goes all the way, curves where I can do my weatherman routine. It goes all the way down to Brown County. It's crazy, and so we're still doing this. And whenever the lines changed, I called everybody and I said, "Is everybody? Are we all doing this?" And nobody really knew what they were going to do yet. I said, "Well, I'm going forward then." Today, as we speak, there's an end of a 4-day hearing in El Paso to decide if we're going to get the lines. I fully expect that we're going to keep the lines we got, but it's still in the air. Still in the air. So, and one of the reasons I stayed in is because I looked at my friend Phil, and Phil's a nice guy. I've known him for more than 12 years. I've represented Phil in court when I was a fairly new attorney. I was of counsel. I do weird things, right? I did bankruptcy and patent stuff. Not everybody does that, so I was of counsel at their law firm, and I represented them. And I know those guys. They're nice guys. But whenever it comes time to stand up, it's never quite there. And I'll just give you a couple of examples that are recent. January of beginning of the last regular session, they were setting up the rules for the House. And the good conservatives all said, we shouldn't have 4-year-olds wearing masks. So one of the amendments offered was to say that anybody younger than 10 wouldn't have to wear a mask. And Phil voted against that amendment. He voted against that amendment. And so, and we could go through a lot of those kinds of things, but the fact is that he's had 1 regular session and 3 special sessions. And I had another judge tell me just recently whenever I said we shouldn't have to depend on these non-laws because our governor is having to issue executive orders that are, and Phil we read a forum, he said, well, it's against the law. Well, it's not against the law. You know, and as we all learned from Electric Company and Sesame Street and whoever else it was that did I'm Just a Bill, right? You got to have three sides of, you know, you got a House, Senate, you have all these steps. No, an executive order is not a law. And so now we have one guy bloviating in D.C. saying, I'm making executive orders, and we got another guy in Austin. Well, now you have two people, both of them making non-law, and they're supposed to arm wrestle and figure out who wins. Give us a law, but we can't get that law. And so I'm resolute that in order for us to gain sanity, we have to put people in office that are going to do that. The other vote I wanted to tell you about is beginning of the last regular session. You can end a Disaster Act proclamation by a majority vote in the House. And the conservatives all said, let's vote on this. All the conservatives voted in favor of getting rid and ending the Disaster Act proclamation. And Phil voted against that. He voted against the end. So here's the good news and the bad news is that Phil's got more than $1 million. He's going to spend it all. You're going to hear his name and see his name everywhere. You know, he's not going to have a lack of that. The good news is it's a primary. And so we don't have to get everybody in the whole world to understand this. We just need to get people that are going to vote in the primary. I would like to think that if you have a better product, you don't need to spend as much on marketing. And so that's all we have to do.